Dear Americans of Reddit, how do you find these first 7 months of Biden's presidency compared to Trump's? Whether you like Trump or Biden or whomever, Obama had it right when he said that having Trump in office was just exhausting in terms of the circus he was always creating. Whether you like Biden or not, it is nice to not constantly wonder what Twitter storms he started when he got his feelings hurt while watching Fox News. You joke, but he always struck me as a good president. He was a man of the people, but when faced with a national crisis he put the smartest men on top of solving it, then convinced the public to follow the science against the will of megacorporations through the power of his leadership. God, I wish. As a lunch lady, being able to provide breakfast and lunch to all students for free is amazing. It's made my job exhausting, but knowing none of my kiddos are going hungry at school is 100% worth it. Advice to parents: make sure you still put in applications for free, reduced. It will show the government of the large need for free meals and will help get more funding for better meals. This is a pretty big one for me actually lol. My parents used to be pretty neglectful and it's nice to have something to fall back on. It provides a security I didn't have before, as I don't come from a low-income family and couldn't get free lunches before. They don't ask for your name or anything, they just give you food, and it's wonderful. And this is why so many people say it doesn't matter who wins. For many millions of people it makes zero difference in their day-to-day lives. Over time it certainly adds up. Tax policies change, some things are made legal, illegal, more damage or a lot more damage is done to the environment, but daily life feels the same. Neither party offers any real hope of making things better. I have heard the theory that Biden plans to be a one-term president. I think that makes sense. He's making difficult political decisions, Afghanistan, that any president would get a lot of flack for and would significantly damage many politicians' careers. However, if you plan on being one and done, it doesn't matter if people hate you at the end because you're not going to go for re-election. I think pulling out of Afghanistan turned out to be a shit show. However, I think it would have turned out poorly no matter who was president. Sometimes there are just no good options, and while I think he could have handled it better, it would only have been marginally. So I do have to commend him for finally doing what needed to be done. I have much higher approval for his domestic policies, COVID, free preschool, infrastructure, etc. Some criticize him for not being progressive enough, but there's so much damage control he needs to do just to get us back to pre-Trump status quo that I'm not that concerned about it. I think pulling out of Afghanistan turned out to be a shit show. I agree, and as much as I hate making excuses for any elected official, I don't think we can have the Afghanistan withdrawal conversation fairly without having locked out the transition team for almost the entire time between Election Day and Inauguration Day conversation. The level of nuance it takes to end a 20-year military occupation has to be perfect, and would definitely be a top item to cover in a presidential transfer of power in any normal, non-bizarro reality. Biden had to really rush the transition in the minimal time he had, and then had to jump right onto the pandemic, which also couldn't get the clean handoff it needed because the exiting administration was more concerned with being combative and trying to push completely fabricated conspiracy theories in a desperate attempt to nullify a fair and free election. I want to put Trump behind us as much as anyone, but unfortunately so many of the problems we are dealing with have a very clear line back to him. Afghanistan was a catch-22 situation: either stay in and have American men and women die for in a losing battle, or withdraw to stop the unnecessary American deaths but let the country get taken over by extremists. People from either side would react hypocritically to whatever Trump, Biden did, considering they'd sing the praises of their preferred leader if said leader did the exact same thing. It was a lose-lose situation, not too dissimilar to Vietnam. People want to say how much better it could have been handled, but I have my doubts. If it was possible for it to not be a shitstorm, then why didn't former presidents pull troops out? Also, Who says it wasn't a shitstorm before? We were trying to nation build and that caused a whole bunch of problems. It was a sad reality. I can't imagine what disaster we left behind for so many who couldn't leave. Staying would have be a bigger commitment than most any American would have thought. We would have continued to lose far more troops, money and decades of time at least. If Trump pulled out of Afghanistan the exact same way, all the MAGA supporters would be cheering him on. This is just how politics is now. There's so much hypocrisy. The choices and the laws don't matter, the politician does. Whoever you voted for in 2020 has probably made some decisions that you disagree with extremely, you just chose to ignore it. Honestly, the USA needed a moderate in the White House. We got one. Nobody really loves him. He wasn't anyone's first pick, but he was the best compromise. I won't for a second say I'm happy with him, but the more I think about it, I think our country is going to come out of the end of his presidency in a better place than when it started, which I don't honestly feel like I can say happened with the past few presidents. Under Trump, I had $200,000 in student loan debt, couldn't afford my medication, can't afford to go see the surgeon, struggled with unemployment, and edged near homelessness almost constantly, but had hoped that maybe things could get better at the next election. Under Biden, I had $200,000 in student loan debt, couldn't afford my medication, can't afford to go see the surgeon, struggled with unemployment, and edged near homelessness almost constantly, but have a greater realization that things are just going to get worse. So, I don't know, boomers won't lift their boots off the necks of their grandchildren. Other than people talking about politics less, I don't really notice any difference in my day-to-day life. Edit, lol. I finally know what it's like to be brigaded by Trumpers. 20 different comments all within a 15-minute span that all say the exact same thing. Gas prices and groceries? No. Gas prices have only gone up about $1/gallon where I live, and my work gives me $6.50/mo plus $0.19/me for vehicle expenditure. The market is up 19% YTD, which drastically outpaces the admittedly high 6% inflation. None of that stuff has changed my day-to-day life at all. The media landscape in our country puts so much emphasis on who is president, and constantly manufacture controversy over trivial non-issues related to the president and national politics, when in all honesty the president doesn't have that much influence over the average American's life, and most people could care less about the president. We are only divided because controversy is profitable. I love the one-issue voter crowd who are obsessed with gas prices. If they are going to make things up, could they at least care about important things like infrastructure, pandemic, medical, education? Ignore gas prices. Apparently the president controls all the gas prices, and that is the only thing to look at. Edited to make it clear about their strange priorities, as if gas is the most important thing. Not that any of those are squarely or remotely decided by a sitting president. I don't understand the gas prices have gone up angle. The economy collapsed and travel was curbed at the start of the pandemic more than a year ago. Companies that produce the stuff were scrambling to shut down supply before they went broke, and the price of oil was low. Of course the prices are going up again as things start to head back towards normal. It means demand is rising. I still don't feel like the government is doing the shit I want them to do, but at least they're not being assholes at the same time. I voted for Biden to get Trump out, but honestly it's hard not to be disillusioned when I feel like neither party is going to give us the type of radical change that we need. And I always find it hilarious when the right acts like Biden is so progressive and crazy, but those of us who actually want change think he is way too conservative. I feel as though so many people, including myself, are in the same boat as you, but being told our whole lives that if you don't vote blue, then red wins for sure, has kind of ruined any chance at another major party forming. I just hope that we can get a truly progressive president one day and start doing the things that actually need to be done to make the US a better place. Unpopular opinion. especially here on Reddit, but he seems to get a huge pass on a lot of important issues. Children are no longer in cages. Instead, they are in safe facilities that do not allow the media to go in. Also, his administration has now lost the location of several children, and even the Dodge has issued red flags for potential human trafficking. Yet any article about it gets downvoted here on Reddit. The Afghanistan pullout was a disaster, and when it was time to ask questions about it, he only answered questions from predetermined reporters who asked him simple and easy questions. How is that fair or even ethical? His administration allowed the eviction moratorium and the unemployment to end, which to be fair had to end eventually. But damn, you've had over half a year to come up with a backup, yet you have nothing. Nothing to help people who are struggling to make ends meet. Zero. He's also taking back a lot of his promises: student loan forgiveness, minimum wage, stimulus checks, etc. But, because this guy doesn't say dumb and controversial shit, then he gets a pass. Now, I don't get it. It really seems like people don't actually care about these issues. They just want their guy to be in power. Your first point, I completely agree. He's done nothing to help with immigrants and children and cages, all while the media has swept the issue under the rug. The Afghanistan pullout would have been a disaster for any president, probably more so with Trump. I'm not going to hold him accountable because it's such an utterly complex situation with so many factors constantly changing that no one could have predicted what happened. They didn't personally allow the eviction moratorium to end, the Supreme Court did. But yes, they're allowing unemployment to end right in the middle of another massive surge in cases. I blame half there and the other half on SCOTUS. State governments can still have eviction moratoriums in place that supersede the federal one, which multiple do. He's only been in office for 7 months, so to say he had a year and a half is entirely disingenuous. He's actually forgiven over $10 billion in student loans since taking office. Minimum wage was stalled in the Senate, but I'll admit I don't remember enough about it to say that with 100% certainty. Stimulus checks were sent out after him taking office, don't you remember? He sent out the other $1,400 that people were calling for at the end of 2020 when the Republican-controlled Senate only allowed $600 despite even Trump calling for $2,000. Don't forget about the child tax credit Biden passed, which I know is helping parents immensely. I'm saying this as an objective person that didn't like either candidate and voted third party out of spite this last election. Overall, I think he's doing a better job than Trump, but I also think he's getting an easier time from the media too. Helps when you aren't tweeting insanely stupid shit 24/7 though lol. Personally, I think it's nice to not be constantly gaslit about every instance involving Trump. I'm not talking about political action or laws. I'm talking about how Trump tweeted some nonsense. The people say WTF. Media outlets report the nonsense. Fox News claimed it was taken out of context. Trump tweets again saying how dumb it was to assume anything but X every single week. It was something like that. Not even important stuff, but things like how Trump doesn't like one celebrity or nobody will buy his daughter's shoes. It was getting to a point where I felt tired and exhausted. God, who can care about education funding being cut when we were just on him calling Democrats morons or saying African countries were shitholes. Now we're talking about him saying masks are dumb. But I just got done being mad about the bullshit COVID assistance payments. Let me go to bed or take a weekend off. Maybe the media did have it out for him, but Trump made it so easy. Watching old speeches and rallies, I never noticed just how bad he was at this job. He flopped and flailed on the stage like a dying fish, blurting out lies and weird-ass threats. He went on fucking bizarre tangents that lasted like 5 minutes and generally couldn't get through his speeches without losing wind. Biden is doing what every president has done, but at least I can really focus on the political gambit and arena instead of inane crap. He says something like how college debt shouldn't be wiped out. I can spend time thinking about it instead of being bombarded with more and more useless drivel. It was getting to a point where I felt tired and exhausted. God, Who can care about education funding being cut when we were just on him calling Democrats morons or saying African countries were shitholes? Now we're talking about him saying masks are dumb. But I just got done being mad about the bullshit COVID assistance payments. Let me go to bed or take a weekend off. This is an actual strategy for political control. Overwhelm you with fresh scandals, fresh outrages, fresh lies to be debunked, fresh uncertainty. Never give anything visibility for long enough to form its own shape separate from what the regime needs from it. It demoralizes and confuses the people paying attention and destroys the ability to form a complete picture of events. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/firehose_of_falsehood. I believe that was calculated. Trump was a lot of terrible things, but you have to give him credit for controlling the narrative most of the time. You can't counter his simple shit when you have to spend so much time and effort countering his batshit insane proposals and statements. If he wanted to talk about something he would just do it. No pretext, no need for a cohesive narrative. He just starts talking, and then everyone starts countering while he just keeps going. He doesn't give a shit if you believe or care what he said. Half the time he probably doesn't believe it himself, and he can deny anything he said because fuck you. That's why. That's old news and he's on to the next idea that pops into his head. And now you're trying to counter the latest bullshit and the cycle begins again. At no point have you been able to present anything new or to counter his awesomeness. Yeah, and people will undoubtedly whine and hear that Reddit is left-wing and not neutral in politics. But it is actually a pretty neutral site. But the right just has so many garbage facets to it, like the cannon wings, that you seriously cannot allow their firehose of bullshit to go unfiltered, or it just lowers the overall quality of content to that of which you can find in a bathroom stall or in the checkout aisle of a Walmart. The thing about all that piss throwing is it shows how much of the checks and balances on presidential authority is based on the president acting in good faith, and when some norm breaker comes along, we see the cracks in the system, like the norm of the last 50 years of a president releasing their taxes. Even though the Manhattan DA eventually did get them, Congress is still caught in an endless loop of appeals, never mind the public. That's why when we're all voting on how we want the next 4 years to go, you should always show up and vote for the cookies. No one is thinking, oh man, I bet if we made better cookies more would show up. No. They're going to watch you get splashed in the face every day and think bet you wish you had a cookie right now. Maybe, just maybe, if the cookies always won, the piss chuckers might question their strategy and actually compete with something better. It's been great. Voted for Bernie and eventually voted for the blue one. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was needed and the chaos just emphasized the need to withdraw. Not entirely happy with the little action on student debt and ending the war on drugs. But the bipartisan infrastructure and partisan reconciliation bill showing a pretty legislatively shrewd president. Doctor was expecting Bilal to sleep, but surprisingly good governance. I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a Dem. I'm a voter that tends to vote based on issues. I am disappointed by the Biden administration. My personal view is he is the Dem nominee that the Dems could unite behind to defeat Trump, and that's it. Dems are eating their own with the super liberal left push. Center-left and center-right politics are dying, and it's a bit scary. Dems aren't looking very strong in some key midterm races, and I'm afraid it will result in more batshit crazy GOP candidates getting elected. From the Biden administration, I hoped for someone that could unite the Democrats under a single platform to keep them strong to counter an extreme left push as well as extreme right pushes. So that the politics were somewhat moderate. The only platform that the Dems can unite behind was anti-Trump, and it puts them in real danger of squandering the gains they made. So far we have some crazy debt added and a failure of an Afghanistan exit. Two pretty big black eyes that I think will make re-election difficult. There is even more of a push to add debt too. I'm pretty socially liberal and believe in strong safety nets for society, but we're not getting that out of the added debt, and I worry about the country my children will inherit. My personal opinion is he will not go down in history as a good president leading an effective administration. Finally, I am just overall disappointed in the fact that our nation's power brokers are 30+ years removed from the mean age. Please let us start electing younger leaders again. Trump, Biden, McConnell, Pelosi, Schumer, etc. I would love to be without.